Tony Gentilucci has written a book, and here it is, Stop Preaching and Start Communicating. Communication principles preachers can learn from television. Now, as I said off the top, you know, most of you are not preachers per se professionally, but you do communicate your faith a lot. I know that. And to look at communication in general terms is always a good thing, but to do it from the perspective of someone who not only understands preaching but also understands television is really quite a combination. Tony works for a major television outlet in the Toronto area, Omni TV, which is seen in other parts of Canada, right?
That's correct.
Is it right across the nation?
Not across, but it's in Edmonton, it's in Calgary, it's in Vancouver.
Right.
So, and 2 stations here in Toronto.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been involved in the TV industry for how long now?
1988.
Since 1988? Mm-hmm. Wow. Your interest in, first of all, let's talk about preaching generally. It's unusual for a TV executive to getting a doctor of ministry in preaching. How did that happen?
That happened because when I started attending church, Jim, I was saying briefly in the green room that I wasn't really overly impressed with what I was seeing on the platforms of churches as far as communicators were concerned. And I said, wow. And to make a long story short, while I was doing my MDiv, I did my MDiv at Tyndale, and while I was doing my MDiv, I came across a book called Biblical Preaching by Haddon Robinson. It was a required text that I had to read. I read this text, and I fell in love with this text. It was written by Haddon Robinson. And long story short, Haddon Robinson comes to Toronto to do a 3-day seminar on how to be a more effective communicator. I moved everything in my schedule to attend this seminar. And after the 3 days of listening to Haddon, I drove home and I said, wow, this guy's really incredible. He gave out a pamphlet and talked about how he teaches a doctoral program at Gordon Conwell in Boston on how to be a more effective communicator, and I said, I got to be there. And I did. I sat under him for 4 years, and I remember first time I met him was during my first residency there. We're sitting across from each other. He wanted us to plant a seed of what our thesis was going to be written on, and I knew exactly what I wanted to write on, and I didn't want to waste any time in writing anything else. And I said, you know, Haddon, and I said to him outright, I said, if you really don't approve what I'm about to share with you, I said, I'm going to take next plane back to Toronto and head back home. I said, but you know, in our world, we make communication irresistible to the point that we try to keep people on the edge of their seat all the time.
In television.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, and basically what I want to do is I just want to share some of the principles that we work with in this world and share them. Maybe perhaps they can use them in this world here in the church world and see how it can be of help to them. And before I can finish the thought, he said, write it. And then he said, if I like what you write, I'll write the foreword to the book. So that really kind of put a bit of a fire under me. And
so is this book sort of your thesis
That's correct.
In a popular style?
That's correct.
Okay, now we can't do a review of the book in the short time we have, but let me ask you this: you quote Robinson a lot in the book. You quote Andy Stanley. I was going to say Charles Stanley. Andy Stanley, and also Rick Warren, and a few others. And these, of course, are outstanding communicators. We've had Andy Stanley here recently, outstanding communicator in Atlanta. But what is it about these effective, you know, 21st century communicators that stands out as far as you're concerned? With all the study you've done on this, why does Stanley have, what, 20,000 people attending his church? Why does Rick Warren have over 50,000? You know, why are they so effective?
You know what? I think the title of the book says it all. They don't preach, but they communicate.
And now, when you say that, when you say that, we generally, when we say you're preaching at me, there's a negative connotation. Why is there a negative connotation to preaching? I mean, preaching is one of the greatest communication arts of all time.
Well, I think it's really how it's presented, Jim.
So you're not dissing preaching?
Absolutely not. No.
Like, there are some great preachers out there.
Absolutely not. Absolutely, that's correct.
Yeah.
And I'm not dissing it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I think we have to change it to what it needs to accommodate to today's audience.
Okay, now you're a communications expert. You're doing television all the time. You know, in about 3 minutes, just summarize for me the key principles of effective communication, maybe the top 3 from your perspective?
Well, I think, first of all, number one, we got to be ourselves. I think what makes Andy Stanley, Rick Warren, Bill Hybels, they come across as someone that they can sit across at a coffee shop just like you and I are right now, and they'll come across in a very natural way, and that's how they communicate on their platforms.
So you're talking authenticity here.
Absolutely. You know, you don't hear those guys with the you shoulds and the you musts, and they come across, hey, look.
Now, this is a good point. When preaching becomes moralizing, people turn off, right?
Big time.
I mean, you can expose the Scripture and let the Scripture speak for itself. But
Absolutely.
if you come across as a scold, you just basically lose your audience.
That's right. That's right.
And unfortunately, a lot of preaching is scolding.
Mm-hmm.
What's another principle of effective communication?
I think it comes down to also, we try to cram too much into one message. We're from the school where, I at least come from the school where, you know, you come across, you communicate one big idea, one message. You know, in our world, we know that a script is written with really one theme there, one central theme, and that theme is threaded throughout everything that we do for that particular program, whether it's a 1-hour documentary, whether it's a sitcom, whether it's a news story. That one theme is threaded throughout. And I think, you know, the days of, okay, now here are 10 points you need to get, or here are 4 things you need to remember. Right. It's like, are you kidding me? You know, when we're sending tweets where the tweet can't be longer than 140 characters. So it's got to come down to one main idea that I can, who was it? Brian Chappell said it best. He says, I'd rather throw a baseball that people can catch rather than a ball of sand that just kind of goes all over the place. And I think sometimes when we're communicating with 10 points or here are 4 things you need to remember, it's like a ball of sand and you really don't get.
And when I'm sharing my faith with my neighbor, what do I need to keep in mind?
You know, again, I think one of the things is you really need to be yourself. Don't try to put on a mask that really doesn't portray who you are.
Play the role. Well, it's a fascinating book, friends. It's called Stop Preaching, Start Communicating. For those of you who would like to be public speakers, there's a lot in here that is very, very, I mean, it's really comprehensive. You've touched base with almost everything. When I was reading it, I was thinking about all the homiletical classes I took in the years when I was training to be a preacher, and boy, you've touched pretty much everything there. Plus, you've brought your television expertise in on it, which really makes it 21st century-ish. Well done.
Thanks, Jim.
And thanks for coming our way.
Thank you.
Coming up, Truth to Go.